Welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Vet Podcast. I'm Andrew Duffer. Today we're joined by Esther Mechler, founder of Spay USA, a founding force behind the United Spay Alliance, and the creator of the Feline Fixby5 campaign. In this episode, again, we talk about why we can't adopt our way out of overpopulation and what it actually means to go upstream and address the root of the problem. We get into the real impact of spay and neuter, not just on population, but on health, behavior, and community welfare. Esther shares how she got started and what she's learned over decades in animal welfare and what still needs to change if we actually want to reduce the number of animals ending up in shelters. So let's get into it.
I want to talk about the Fix-by-5 and why it's
Yes,
so important to get the cats
yes,
spayed. I think a lot of people
yes,
have questions about the age in which you should get a dog and a cat spayed and neutered. Is it different by the
yes.
breed and by the gender?
Well, Jeff could speak to that as a veterinarian. My understanding is with the larger dogs, some of them, they feel it needs to hold off, and with the smaller dogs, it should be by 6 months. But Jeff is the expert, not me.
Well, I'll just say they did a study, a Banfield study, okay, in 2013. They studied 2.2 million dogs, 460,000 cats, and what they found is fixed female dogs live 23% longer. Fixed female cats live 39% longer. Fixed male dogs, 18% longer. Fixed male cats, 62% longer. All right. And this is, obviously, we had almost 2.6 million animals involved in this study. It was pretty comprehensive. They say, oh, they're more likely to have cancer. Yeah, no kidding, because they live longer. All right. So if I live to be 90, my chance of having cancer is much greater than if I live to be 50. Okay.
Sure.
A lot of it is how things are interpreted. And there's just been a real pushback. Now they're saying, oh, leave the hormones, it's better for them, so like
Mhm.
take the uterus, but leave the ovaries. Down in Mexico, they said, let them enjoy the honeymoon. They call that the honeymoon. So the dog can go and eat and have sex. Well, animals don't have sex for fun. They have sex to reproduce. They don't need to reproduce. That's the reality.
So with dogs and cats, you said it depends on the age or no?
Yeah, to some degree, we can do them really young. There's just no issue. And Esther basically got fixed by five, accepted by the AVMA and most cat groups and most animal groups, quite frankly, which is fixed by 5 months because we know cats come in the heat and can get pregnant at 5 months. So if you're fixing them by five, you don't tend to have reproductive worries in terms of overpopulation. It gets to be a little dicier with dogs because of a lot of the stuff put out by UC Davis. And once again, I think they're very flawed studies and I don't buy them. I'll do dogs down as young, well, dogs and cats down as young as 5 weeks. 5 months is the ideal goal because they can have shots and deworm and all those kind of things. So 5 months is always a good goal.
So just to clarify, Fix-by-5 applies to dogs and cats.
No, well, Esther can address that.
I'll address that. What happened was I guess it was about 10 years, 15 years ago, we decided to go try to work on this problem because people were complaining about kitten season all the time. And my reasoning was they won't be a kitten season anymore if all the cats are fixed before 5 months of age. So I thought, well, maybe we'll focus on the cats first because that, first of all, was a much bigger problem at that time than the dogs. There were more of them because they multiply 3 times as fast. But then uh, so we decided we were going to start with feline fixed by 5, with 5 months of age for cats, and put aside the dog question for a later time. Because back then, the Davis studies had just been done, and everybody was all worried about fixing dogs too early. So I thought rather than wait another 5 years, let's start with the feline fixed by 5, and then we'll see about the dogs. And I think we're ready to start working on that. The United Spay Alliance is talking about fixed by 6. But we're still waiting to talk to a lot of veterinarians about the whole prospect of doing that and get the veterinary input on that, just like we did for the cats. So that's my answer about the reason we started with cats rather than dogs was we already knew that the veterinarians were fixing cats by 20 weeks or 5 months. And it was okay at the AVMA for shelter animals. And my question to them was, if it's okay for shelter cats, why isn't it okay for all cats? It's the same
Right.
species. And they agreed. And it turned out that they all agreed that 5 months is the best practice. And that was a great day for the cats, I think.
Yeah, cats are a lot less controversial in a lot of ways, and they're much again, they're really they've always been at a higher euthanasia rate. They reproduce faster, so there's just that was a major thing to be addressed. And while cats was still are a problem, overpopulation is still a problem. Fixing by five really does make a real difference in the outcome in areas.
So I think you told me, Esther, that you got into this work after you saw some stuff at was it Bridgeport Shelter in 1990?
Yes, that's right. I think a lot of people start because of one incident of one animal. I saw this beautiful black and white cat there, and I called him Buddha. I was just in there just looking at the animals. I called him Buddha because he was so serene and so calm, and I said to the people there, I would love to adopt this cat. I can't take him in, but if you give me 2 weeks, I'm sure I'll find someone to take him. And I came back a week later, 2 weeks later, and he was gone, and he was, had been euthanized. And that's when I started to realize how difficult it is to get these animals adopted. You can have a wonderful animal and they haven't got a chance. So thinking about it, I talked about this upstream business. May I say real quick what that upstream thought was in my case?
The little parable that we talked about yesterday?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
might make it clearer rather than talking about upstream. The story is that there's a river in India, and a whole bunch of people are on the shore looking, and a whole bunch of babies come floating by. Some of them screaming and they're drowning, and everybody kind of goes into the river to try to save as many as they can possibly save. And one guy didn't jump in the river; he walked upstream, and they said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going upstream to find out why all these babies are floating down the river." Well, that was kind of the mindset I had when I was at that shelter. I said, "What's up with this here that there's so many cats and we can't get enough homes for them?" And it wasn't there's too many being born. So I did go to my vet and said, "Would you, if I sent you people to fix cats and send you a lot of them to do, would you be able to give me a discount?" And he said, his name was Dr. Arnold Brown. He said, "Yes, I will give you a discount." And that was the start of the Spay program, because I began to realize pretty quickly that Bridgeport isn't the only place with that problem, and it's a problem that's kind of universal. So I spent the first year in my basement of my house, calling different shelters all around the country to see if they had a vet that they could work with. And it took a couple of years, but we got more and more vets in that a group of people that we could refer to. And that was the beginning of my work in spay neuter. But it came from that one cat at the Bridgeport shelter that got me thinking and trying to think upstream instead of downstream.
People need to know that Esther has probably done more for animal welfare in this country than any person I've ever met, and certainly more than any veterinarian I know. In the end, she started Spay USA, which went all across this country, had conferences all over, and spay and neuter was the thing. She went on to do Fix by Five. Now she's is involved with United Spay Alliance. She's been working tirelessly for as long as I've known her, which goes back to the early '90s, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
30 years. Yeah.
and very selfless, amazing human being, and she really does care about animals. And the thing is, it's like it's common sense, but she thinks big picture, and I think that's the problem. Too many people think small. They look what's in front of them, and I get, it's the old starfish. You got the starfish is being washed up on the beach, and little girl throwing them out, throwing one out at a time. And someone said, "Why are you doing that?" It doesn't make a difference. Well, it makes a difference to that one. And I get that idea. But, as soon as someone told me that story, and it may have been Esther told me that story, the first thing I thought, well, hell, just build a big concrete structure out in the ocean so they can't wash up on the beach. So stop them all from coming in. And it's kind of the same thing. You go upstream, right?
Yeah.
So, that's the point. You got to get back to the root of the problem, and we've gone away from that. I hate to say it. And it's making the root of the problem come back like gangbusters. And, with no kill, we just don't see it, because instead of euthanizing them, they leave them on the street to die or leave them in the woods to die. And so they get eaten, they get hit by car, they get poisoned, they get shot. You can just go on, and it's not the way it should be in this country, not in the richest country in the world. And, we should be able to solve this issue.
Well, Esther, tell us about the United Spay Alliance.
Well, the United Spay Alliance, the premise is that in every state we have a leader, someone who is on top of the information about spay neuter in their state. And in that way, we kind of decentralized it. Spay USA was all one hotline. And I began after a while to realize that with 360 million people, and we got a little office with 2 or 3 phone counselors, it's not going to be enough. So when we built United Spay Alliance, I compare it to Spay USA was like a pyramid, and it was all centered in one office. But United Spay Alliance is kind of like a bicycle wheel, and we have connections, these spokes to people in every state, and then in every state we have listing of the spay neuter resources, affordable resources for that state. And some of the states have had conferences about spay neuter and worked on legislation. So it's very good because it spreads the responsibility out, it spreads the activity out. People are involved. We had a state leaders meeting yesterday, and I think there were 25 people on the Zoom call from all over the country. So they help each other. Like one person will say, well, we have a terrible problem with no-shows whenever we do our clinics. And someone from another state would pipe up and say, well, what worked for us was that we had them prepay $25 and it was non-refundable. And that problem went away. So we share the problems and the solutions, and it's been working very well. We've been in existence for 10 years now.
So you got into this, in 1990,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
then you met Jeff in 1993, just 3
that
years
is correct.
later.
Yes.
And what did you say about Jeff? It was his, mobile bus
Yeah.
that got your attention,
Yeah.
thinking outside of the box.
I was gonna have the picture of that ready for you. Maybe I can send it to you, but it was this old school bus, and this guy, he looked pretty much like he looks today, standing next to the school bus. And for some reason, I don't remember how I knew that it was a spay clinic. I guess something, a caption said that it was this mobile spay neuter clinic, and I thought,
Yeah.
now there's a guy that's very creative, and he's tackling this problem in a way and nobody else I ever heard. I think Jeff, you even had sleeping quarters in the bus, right, so that you could go for a 2 or 3 day
Yeah.
jaunt out to the wilderness and take care of the cats and dogs out there. Anyway, it was very creative, and that was the summer we had our first Spay USA conference, and at Bentley College in Boston, and we invited Jeff to be one of the speakers to talk about mobile clinics. And now, the current mobile clinics, they might cost $150,000, $200,000 fully outfitted, but I think Jeff did his for like $15,000 or something. We thought that was very cool too.
Yeah, I think working in animal control really made me realize that it's a small percentage of people that create the largest percentage of the problems. And no
Uh-huh.
matter what, if you build a nice clinic, you're not going to build it in a really probably poor neighborhood as a general rule. And you have to go to the people. You have to go, poor people make poor decisions all the time. And they're not always highly motivated, and because they're struggling with life. So, the idea behind my mobile clinic was to go to the poor areas throughout Colorado and in reservations. To just reach out and help them because they're in desperate need of it, and, there's just nothing else available for them.
Let me ask, did you become convinced early on that, you can't adopt your way out of pet overpopulation? When and what made you realize that?
Well, that first cat made me realize that. I don't know about Jeff, but when I saw what was this beautiful cat, I mean, calm, serene, a wonderful animal. If we couldn't find him a home in 2 weeks in a, fairly densely populated area, I thought, oh, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. Jeff said it many times, dogs multiply 15 times as fast as humans and cats 45 times as humans. That
Yeah.
alone is enough to say we'll never adopt our way out. Isn't that true, Jeff? Did I get those numbers right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we also know, as back in the day, only like 15% of people got their animals from shelter. Now it's much more in vogue now. So it's probably as high as 30 and 40% in some areas. In some areas, it's still lower, but it's a lot better than it used to be. AKC was at their lowest a few years ago in terms of, people that had joined them. But, with all this revival in why you don't spay and neuter, they've been funding some of those studies, of course, and so, they're kind of making a comeback. And so I don't know, there's just always going to be pushback when there's money involved. And that's the reality. So you have big groups that are bringing in millions of dollars that are sitting on it, collecting assets every year, and not doing near what they could be doing in terms of helping people keep animals in their own home, not having to give them up. And then, then you have AKC and places like UC Davis pushing back, well, there's no reason to spay and neuter, that you don't do it. And there's just too many problems. And when you don't do it, anyone that's had intact animals knows that these, I mean, it's not that they're all bad, but I always say they're like teenage boys on a Friday night with too much beer in them. Okay, they're just looking for trouble. That's the problem. You get a bunch of intact male dogs running around. They can be friendly as all get out individually, but together they're dangerous,
Mhm.
be it male and female. And so I don't know. There's just we got a ways to go, but we've come a long ways. I mean, we used to kill 26 million animals a year. We're down to 4 to 6 million, depending on who you want to believe. I think it's back up. They were down to 1 or 2 or 3 million for a while. I think we're back up
Right.
more like 4 to 6. And because you got to throw in economic euthanasia now too, because
Mhm.
people just can't afford to keep their animal. So if it has a broken leg or big medical condition, it's easier to euthanize them, because they can't afford it. And that's really sad. And that's where the big groups with the large, huge amounts of money should be coming in and opening full service veterinary hospitals. It can't just be spay neuter clinics anymore. The spay neuter clinics need to become full service hospitals. And I really do believe that. It's a challenge for the future.
So, what do y'all think that people are missing when they focus on animal transport instead of preventing the next litter? I mean, obviously, there's greed and, they want the perpetual crisis, but is that the only disconnect?
I think some of them don't, they just don't see it. I think that the grassroots people and rescue groups see what's out there. They see the awful stories that are true. And I think some of these people that are handing down policies are just not in touch with reality. I think that's part of the problem too. Part of it may be the financial interests that they have, but I think it may also just be a disconnect. And then the general public seems to be listening to people that don't have experience with this. People can be off in the desert somewhere creating policies that have no relevance to Philadelphia or Baltimore or Bridgeport. And I think that's part of what's happening as well.
Yeah, if you just look at even the airplane transport, from different groups, you lose track of the animals. There's no transparency. And once again, it should not be about live release rate, just throwing animals out anywhere willy-nilly. It should be about retention rate. Are those animals going to home, or are they there a year, 2 years, 5 years later? No one does that kind of
I
research. They
know.
don't want to because they know it's not real. And I just know groups, very, very big groups worth tens of millions of dollars. They have quite a bit of adoption issues, in terms of paperwork you got to do. But yet I've seen those animals literally within a 2 week period be given up to someone else or come into my clinic no longer owned by the person they were adopted to. So there's no easy answer. These are complex social problems, but having said that, we can do a far better job than we're doing, no doubt.
Well, do y'all think that's what we should call kill shelters is outcome shelters? Because I feel like they're more outcome focused than the no kill movement. Do you think that would help change the narrative at all?
I think you should just call them true shelters, maybe. The ones that take in every animal are true shelters, and the other ones are just pass the buck shelters.
Let's call them selective intake shelters.
Like, yeah,
Is that
yes.
what they're called? Like, apart from no kill?
Yeah. Yeah,
Selective
basically.
intake?
Yeah. Limited intake, selective
Yeah.
intake, however you wanna word it, I mean,
Mhm.
and the thing is they get many of these have government contracts and they get government money, and yet
Mm,
they still will refuse to pick up an animal,
mhm,
running loose
mhm.
if you bring a litter of puppies in, they won't take them. And I don't even understand that. I don't know how that's I don't understand why more people aren't suing over those kind of things, especially if someone gets bit or something like that by one of those animals that's left out there, or just the trauma of letting your children see an animal get hit by a car or eaten by something, and knowing that animal control could have done something about it and they didn't. I mean, to
Mhm.
me, it's outrageous.
Esther, what is the United Spay Alliance doing to help shelters and veterinarians expand access to affordable spay and neuter?
Well, what we're trying to do is to make their job easier by seeing to it that there are fewer animals born. That just covers a host of stuff. They won't need to transport them. They don't need to give many out because they won't have been born. I think it just sums it up. We're going upstream and we're cutting off the supply of in this case of if you say if your basement is flooded, you turn off the water first. You don't just go down with a bucket and keep emptying the bucket. So I think the big picture is what United Spare Alliance in many different ways is doing, is trying to reduce intake at shelters, not by turning animals away, but by seeing to it that there's fewer animals. they wouldn't be there in the shelter needing help if they weren't born in the first place. I don't know if that's hard for the public to get their head around or something.
I
Maybe
was
there's
just
another way to
fixing
put
to ask
that. You know
why
what
is
I
that
mean?
so hard to understand?
What's that?
Why I'm just fixing to ask why is it so hard to
I don't know.
understand?
I don't know. I don't know. Do you have a thought on that, Jeff? I don't know why it seems to be so hard to understand either.
Well, I think humans are humans. We're flawed. I mean, I look at dogs and cats as, I mean, they don't drop from the sky. It's just they don't just spontaneously, combust around your house. All of a sudden, you got 20 cats. It doesn't work like that. It's really basic biology, But I do look at dogs and cats. It's almost like a challenge to humankind in terms of our humanity,
Mhm,
our caring
mhm.
and our humanity. It's to me it reflects on that. And there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of humanity, in my opinion, and
Mhm.
and will ignore things. And you know, I don't know. It's tough. A lot of people don't believe in spay neuter, not because of anything they've ever learned, but just because they think it's not natural. Which is the dumbest thing ever. It's
Well,
I don't
can
know.
we address that? Because I hear that a lot for pushback, like you've said in the past, people compare dogs to wolves and cats to lions, and they're like, "Well, they're not spayed and neutered in nature, so why do they need to be?"
Oh, yeah. How do you answer that?
Well, they're domestic animals. It's Felis domesticus, Canis familiaris. They've been inbred and bred by humans for thousands, tens of thousands of years in some cases. So, we're responsible for them in the end.
Mhm.
That's the
Yeah.
bottom line.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
just to let them breed willy-nilly makes no sense, and those same people, once again, give them a couple of cats, see how they are in a year from now when they have 40, 50, 60 cats, do you really want them? So it's okay to shoot them, it's okay to kill them, but it's not okay to spay and neuter them, I don't
Yeah.
understand that mentality, and you see that sometimes, so I don't know. If you're gonna vaccinate your animal, if you're gonna deworm it ever, if you're gonna do anything like that, that's a medical intervention. There's nothing natural about that. Coyotes and foxes that they don't get dewormed. They don't get, but if they
Mhm.
get mange, they suffer and many times die from it. Not sometimes caring people will put out some ivermectin and some meat to demange them, but that's not the general rule.
Yeah.
So nature is totally different. And if we want to be held to the standard of nature, then why should any of us even be civil? Why not just like if it's going to be the mighty should survive, then okay, I should be able to kill and rape and do whatever I want. I mean, that's the mentality. Like that makes no sense. I mean, we're humans and we can, kind of rise above nature, I think, and think beyond that and have compassion and caring. And it's not a weakness. I don't see it as a weakness at all. I see it as a strength. And I don't know. I don't understand the cruelty some people have. I never will.
Andy, what asked one of the things or some of the things we're doing to help this reduction in intake. We are doing because the veterinarians in the past have been trained to do a spay, let's say a cat spay in 45 minutes, whatever it is, and it's not very efficient. And if we're trying to do large numbers of cats efficiently and safely, they can learn new techniques that are not yet taught in vet school. And so what United Spay Alliance is doing is setting up wet labs in every state wherever we're requested. And we've had several of them here in Maine, and there have been a couple of them in Connecticut and Massachusetts. In Georgia, there's a very strong program down around the Atlanta area. So that is one way that we can concretely address the need for more vet help. And another thing is that Fix by Five campaign that you talked about, because if enough veterinarians were spaying and neutering these cats before 5 months or by 5 months, there wouldn't be all these litters, and that again would take the burden off of the shelters and animal control because there would be way fewer cats out on the street that are in trouble. So those are two ways. The wet labs and the Fix by Five campaign are two ways that we are trying to alleviate the pressure that the shelters are under.
We hope to have one of those wet labs this year at our clinic here up in Conifer, Colorado. So haven't
Great.
done it yet. We've just been, I got all the new vets and we're still grooming them. So I got to get to a position where we can bring some people in. But I'm looking
Super.
forward to helping people out that way. And we'll see how that works. But yeah, it's more. We need a public education too. People need to know that it's okay to get those animals fixed and to get them in and, get them vaccinated.
Mhm.
But again, if you're going to pay I see 3, 4, $500 for a cat neuter. It takes me 30 seconds to do it, and like a few bucks in drugs and stuff. So I don't understand how they make some of these prices up. And in the end, we have to be able to help the average American.
Yes. Yes.
Doesn't not spaying and neutering cause what is that thing that you do all the time? Or it's
Or
in the uterus, the
pyometra?
right.
Oh,
Pyometra?
oh, yeah, breast cancer, pyometra, there's a ton of things, and we know all the things that spay neuter helps prevent, and, what we did last week, I think we had 5 pyometras come in, you know, um,
Oh
And
we had
that's
my.
one
from
dog.
not getting them spayed.
Yeah, and we had one dog come in, and these are always animals that have rotten teeth and other things. There was always multiple issues with them because they've just been neglected, and some of it just comes back to money, as much as anything. It's not like some have been bred, some of them haven't been bred. We had a dog come in that they had waited way too long. The puppy was like 5 times the normal size because it was swelled up, it was rotten, and that dog ended up dying. We ended up saving 1 puppy out of 3. So they have that, but it's like I hope they learn a lesson, hope the animal gets fixed, but I just hear insane stories. Of one of my own employees, his sister adopted a dog that was pregnant, not going to spay it because didn't believe in that. Okay, it had dystocia, couldn't give birth, ended up going into a hospital, spent thousands of dollars, and the puppies died anyway. You know, we these stories, and if you're going to have a dog or an animal that breeds, you better have some money just in case, because nature's not always easy that way, and that things don't always work out. So if you're not prepared to spend anywhere in this day and age $2,000 to $5,000, you better not be breeding. It doesn't make any sense.
Well,
Okay.
this idea with fixing felines by 5 months, they did studies that were substantial on pyometra, or no, mammary gland cancer. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's even worse. The mammary gland cancer incidence is 91% less if a cat never has gone into heat. In other words, if you spay that cat before she's 5 months old and she's not in heat yet, the estrogen hasn't kicked in. If you spay her, she has 91% better chance of not getting mammary gland cancer, and that's a deadly disease. And
And-
talk about expensive and horrible. It's preventable, but
and-
you have to fix the cats before their first heat. And with the male cats, what you prevent is a lot of that bad behavior that
yeah.
people complain about. They bring them to the shelter because they're spraying and marking and all that. If you neuter the cat, the male cat, by 5 months, he won't be doing that. Very unlikely, Jeff. I mean, I guess it could happen, but it's very unlikely that they spray and mark if they're neutered before 5 months, the male cats, right?
Yeah, it becomes a learned behavior, and if you wait till like 2 years, we know statistically if they started spraying, sometimes they keep on spraying.
Yeah.
Because there's drugs we can give them to get them out of that, but a lot of these things are learned behaviors as they get older. As the hormones kick in, they
Mhm.
do things that they do out in more nature type situations.
Mhm.
Male dogs marking, and they do get a little bit more aggressive as they get older. When they're intact, that's just the reality of life. So.
It's testosterone at work.
Yeah, testosterone at work.
Well, can you explain to people why they get those cancers? Is it because they're not using those things? You have to use it to prevent it, or
No, I mean, that gets in the whole thing, what causes cancer. We know there's a high correlation with a lot of different things. Pyometras, breast cancer in cats is 90% is hot cancer, and it almost always kills them unless you're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on chemo and different things. It's a really ugly cancer. In dogs, we know if you get them by the first heat, it's really rare they get breast cancer. Breast cancer is the number one cancer in female dogs. 50% are benign, 50% are malignant. We know if we do get them early, do surgery on them, we can save them about 50% of the time that have the malignant ones. But that still means 25% are going to die from it, and you still have an expensive surgery, and you still have to spay and neuter them, because that hormones drive some of those things. So we know the tangibles, there's say pyometras, testicular cancer, prostate issues. I mean, these things, and they occur in really high rates, like as high as 60% of male dogs over the age of 8 have some kind of prostate issue. It can be really high numbers in some of these animals. So, there's just, I don't know, the things they come up with for reasons not to for spay neuter are ridiculous in all honesty, and they're very poorly documented. And in the end, once again, if you're living 25, 30% longer, guess what? You're more likely to get some cancers. I'd rather take, I mean, I have had cancer. I'm on my fourth round of cancer, and I just soon not have it till I get a little bit older. But, I don't think I'm going to make it a little bit older because I've had so much cancer, but in the end, it's, it does make a difference how old you are for the most part, minus environmental stuff.
Jeff, you've been kicking cancer's ass, I have to say. You're
Well,
still going.
it takes a lot to kill me, evidently.
Good.
That's a good thing.
Yes, good thing. Yes.
But when we talk about spay and neuter, we mainly talk about overpopulation, but y'all are saying that it is a cancer preventative.
Yeah.
It has medical reasons and behavioral reasons as well as the population reason. And I should maybe jump in here in case there's not another chance to talk about this, but Feline Fixed by 5, February is Feline Fixed by 5 month. And that's a month we hope that everyone will celebrate because there are medical reasons for spaying cats before 5 months, and there's behavioral reasons we talked a little bit about. And we hope that people all around the country will tune into the United Spay Alliance and get some materials to hand out to their vets and get more vets on board. There are not that many private vets that are doing Fixed by 5 at this point. We found out someone did a survey recently, and we had thought that after 10 years that it has been endorsed by all the major vet organizations. After 10 years of that, we still have a large number of private vets that are not fixing by 5 months.
I did a talk on spay neuter, and I got a form here in front of me just to talk about a few things. But I give you an example. Like osteosarcoma is like the #1 bone cancer, but it's 2.5 times higher in males over females and 200 times higher in giant breeds over small breeds dog. Oh, if you neuter a Rottweiler or a giant breed dog, it gets osteosarcoma. It's because you neutered it. Well, ridiculous. It's 200 times more likely to get that because if it's a giant breed. Period. The end of discussion. Has nothing to do with being fixed or not fixed. But that's the kind of statistic they'd like to skew. Hemangiosarcoma represents 2% of all canine tumors, but Goldens and German Shepherds, Boxers, and Vizslas are notorious for it. Goldens in particular. So why? So obviously, AKC doesn't want to accept the fact that certain breeds have diseases built into them, and we all know that. I mean, go get insurance and then take down some genetic condition and see if your insurance pays for it. No, that's a genetic condition. We know that German Shepherd has bad hips, could have bad hips, and so therefore we're not going to cover it because that's an underlying condition due to its genes. And you see that a lot with some of the insurance groups. We talk about fixed animals are obese. Well, for the record, 46% of Americans are obese. I guarantee you 40% of Americans aren't fixed. Okay. So, it's bullshit. I mean, my dogs have all been fixed and none of them are obese, and I feed them right and I exercise them. What's that?
The food that we have is not healthy.
Oh, no, absolutely. No, and just saying half the food we feed our animals is not healthy, and they need exercise. Dogs aren't meant to just sit around all day. I mean, they really aren't. So, exercise them.
Well, getting back to spay and neuter, so y'all would say that spay and neuter is the foundation of basically everything in animal welfare. Behavior, health, overpopulation. I mean, what else?
We've sort of divided into those 3 categories. The medical is the whole fact that mammary gland cancer is 91% less likely in spayed females. Behavioral, the males don't spray and mark and they're not as aggressive. And then the community element is the fact that the shelters are not overwhelmed. There aren't as many strays on the streets because they just were never born. And can you think of other categories, Jeff? That's what we always focused on.
No, I mean, those are the major things in the animal's life. And there's an incredible study done by Yokes out of University of Ohio, and he's not a veterinarian. He does epidemiology, but he looked at 3 different cities. One had ABC, animal birth control, for like 12 years or 20 years. One had only for a few years, and one didn't have it at all. And he looked at 7 different parameters: canine distemper, parvo, different things, fleas, ticks, those kind of things, and dog fights. And and the end result was, and he didn't have an explanation for it, but it hit me. It was obvious to me, and that is that in the areas where they had ABC, animal birth control, all they did was spay and neuter and give them a rabies vaccine. They didn't give them
Mhm.
distemper, parvo, or any other vaccine, just rabies and spay and neuter. They had the healthiest animals overall by a lot. The ones that had for animal birth control for a short period of time had intermediate health, and the ones that had no animal birth control had the worst health overall. And it's logical because the moment you fix animal, they don't roam as much. And if you don't roam as much, you don't come across diseases, you don't come across more parasites. I mean, you decrease roaming by 90% as a general rule just by fixing them. You decrease aggression by 60%. You decrease marking by 50%. And those things all matter in a given area. So animals interact less with each other, and therefore they stay home and they're healthier. And people tend to bond to them more. When we started doing work in Mexico, like people would say, well, that's, not really my animal, because it wanders off and comes back. And, but when you start fixing them and they hang out and actually stay at home, and they don't, because instead of going out and get hit by a car every year, have to get a new dog every year, that dog doesn't run away and sticks around, and they have it for 2 or 3 years. They're more likely, we know, once they're fixed and vaccinated, they're more likely to make a future investment in that same animal, which is good for the veterinary profession, for the record. So there's no questions that, I'm not altruistic about this. I mean, I think it's good for my profession. I think it's good for the animals. So therefore I promote it.
Isn't that something that Ruth Steinberg talked about too on the Native American reservations when the spay campaigns happened? After that, the dogs were much more, they're better fed and better cared for and everything.
Yeah, dog food sales goes up, things like that. There's things you can
Mhm.
track. Bites go down, the number of
Yeah,
bites go down.
right. I went down a couple of times where Spay Mexico was working in areas where things just turned around at a certain
Yeah.
point. And I think that's what we're trying to promote with United Spay Alliance is just get that awareness out there that you can do something, It may take some time. It took 10 years to get that Fix by 5 thing, approved and all that and endorsed, but it's worth it then what you see afterwards.
No, and I think that there's people everywhere. I always say there's captains, in every city, and every block, virtually every block has somebody that really cares about animals. And the thing is, they think they're alone.
Yes.
They don't understand it. Just over, two neighbors down, they care the same way you care. And
Yes.
so giving them an opportunity to interact and to
Yes.
do something and have a focus is a real
Mhm.
positive thing. And we just need to recruit more of those people who really do
Yeah.
care and want to make a difference. Because I
Right.
know they're out there. There's a lot more
Yeah.
caring people. 70% of people of American households have animals in them. 40% have children in it. Think about that.
Mhm.
So well, people care about animals. They like animals. So
Yeah.
let's do a better job taking care of them.
That's well said.
I think a lot of people do care about animals, but they're being misinformed by big humane groups that want money.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people divided when they actually all want the same thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does come back to a fight over money, and that saddens me because once again, if you look at billions of dollars, groups are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet I get calls and I get emails and I get letters from states like Georgia and Mississippi and Tennessee. How can I get low cost this? How can I get this done? How can I get an ACL done? I can't afford $8,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, whatever a given quote is. And why aren't we addressing that? It's not just about overpopulation. To me, that's a big thing because once again, we address that, we have less animals we have to worry about, but then we still have the animals that are in good homes. We want to keep them in good homes. And
Mhm.
the average American, based on several reports, just can't afford the average veterinary cost. Something like 40% of people can. It's probably less than that now. That was a 2021 report. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Bob Christensen.
Is there anything else that you wanna talk about, Esther or Jeff? Do you wanna
Well,
get back to the
I would
snowstorm?
just say very quick shout out, I guess they call it, to the people listening to check out the UnitedSpayAlliance.org website and find out about Feline Fix by 5 months. We also have a website that's fixby5.org. But there's materials that you can print out. Take them to your vet. Ask your vet if he or she is fixing by 5 months or not. And if not, bring the material in and try to convince them. We also have wet labs to teach the vets um, how to do the earlier spay neuter. It's not hard, right, Jeff? He's been doing it for years. So I
Well,
guess you just want to make sure that February will be fixed by 5 months all across the country. That's my little 2 cents worth from here.
and, if you I really like, Dr. Bushby,
Mhm.
Amy Berlin, Dr. Berlin, and Dr. Lisa Howe. I mean, they do a lot of stuff. They have a lot more credentials behind their names than I have. I have the history of just work. These people have education, but we've come to the same conclusions about a lot of things because you see things over time and you realize what makes a
Mhm.
difference and doesn't. So I really do follow them a lot, and I think they produce some pretty good literature, and they can certainly comment on some of the literature that's coming out. So I do kind of follow them and listen to what they have to say because I do think there's a lot of misinformation, and then it may come to pass that certain things like, okay, CCLs, torn ligaments in the knee, you know, it occurs in about 3.5% of animals, I think, across all breeds. So
Mm.
say 3.5. So let's say you fix them and it goes up to 4.5. And many times they say, well, it's increased. Once again, we don't look at the fact that 86% of dogs are fixed in America, and something like 90% of cats are fixed in America that live in households. Okay. So that's a really high percentage. So they don't always factor that in, because if you're drawn from the general public, then I would say 8 to 2, so that means, so for fixed animals, you could have basically 8 animals with the disease, where only 2 animals that are unfixed to have the same proportion. So they don't always take into account the demographics when they're doing some of these studies. And I think all this has to be factored in. But so what? Okay, my chance of my dog having a torn CCL goes up 1%, from 3.5% to 4.5% or something. But it lives, 3 years longer. I'll take the torn CCL every day. So, but a lot of this stuff is just up in the air, and I think a lot of it's been really misrepresented to the general public, and I think it's misrepresented on purpose. I really do. I think it comes back to this money. So,
That's what I'm gathering just from just now being introduced to a lot of this information. I'm already at that conclusion. That
follow the money. Ask who does the study. When I got out, I started doing vaccine clinics, low-cost vaccine clinics, and evidently I advertised about them, and evidently that was unethical at the time back in the '90s, because I guess you weren't supposed to advertise as a veterinarian. I don't know, it was weird. The board didn't like that I was doing mobile vaccine clinics. I was the first one, and we used to have, literally, we would do, not uncommon to do 1,000, 2,000 shots, in hours. Just at lines sometimes a mile long. It was insane. People really wanted it. And a lot more animals got vaccinated, and a lot less died of parvo and distemper. But because I did that, I said, look, if I'm going to take heat for doing vaccine clinics, what I thought was doing a public service. That's how naive I was. The vets came out of the woodwork and hated it, but I said, okay, I'm going to look at everything I can find on vaccines. And I did. And I probably read 100 studies or more. And that was a lot more vaccines on the market back then. But whoever funded the study won. It was like, oh, ours is always a little bit better. Ours is always, whoever funded the study, their vaccine, what did this or didn't do this. And there was, oh, we have an unbiased study from the University of Tennessee. Okay, it was unbiased from the standpoint of the one who won the study is the biggest contributor to the University of Tennessee in general, but not to that study specifically. All right. So, there really are, and the few little short unbiased studies there were out there that are really rare in the literature, you got to dig deep. What we found is that, one shot, two shots, and animals are basically immune for many, many years. So we way over vaccinate,
Mhm.
but that doesn't make the press, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Mm.
we live in an age where you pay for your research. If you want an outcome, you can find someone and pay them, and they'll give you that outcome 9 times out of 10. If it's all possible, anything close. So, and that scares the hell out of me, because true science is kind of fallen aside. It's not that there's not people doing it, but there's a lot less people doing it than ever has been. True basic science.
what was the reason for not liking the mobile clinic?
I don't know. part of it is, well, you need to be around. This is, well, what if there's a problem? Well, they can take it to an emergency place, or they can take it to that, or they can bring it to me, or they can call me and I can come down depending on, how far away it is. But when I was in school, vet school, we'd go out and do cattle or horses, sometimes 2 or 3, 4 hours away, sometimes in a different state. They go up to Wyoming. We're not around follow up, what, the thing is they make these rules and they enforce them differentially depending on who you are and what they like. I mean, the corruption on the state vet board level is profound to me, and the ignorance is profound to me, because I don't believe for a second they have the greater good for animals involved at all. It's about maintaining, once again, profit and money. Oh,
You want me to keep this in?
well, I don't care. I mean, upon my license sooner or later. They've been trying for years. I just don't care anymore. I'm too old to care.
I know, I'm just kidding. I know you wouldn't care. They're gonna get you though, Jeff.
Yeah, it's not our time.
Well, see, Esther, this wasn't so bad.
No, it's so funny. I'm sitting here with my cell phone held up in the air, and it's pretty dark. But if it works for you, I'm happy.
Hanging out.
Huh?
We're just hanging out.
It's just it.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking of that. Yeah, well, yeah, it is. You were right. You were right. I admit. Yeah, and we got through the techno terrorism too. So I think hopefully you got some footage that you can use, and
We've got an hour's worth of footage.
wow, you can do something with that, right?
But see, like we were just having a conversation. You knew your stuff. You shouldn't have doubted yourself. Will you come back?
You tell Jeff, I wrote it all out, like 4 pages of stuff. I didn't realize that it would be the 3 of us, and I thought
did.
I was
I was
supposed to
like,
tell
"Jeff,
all about
call
United
her."
Spay Alliance, so I took it seriously, and all the dates, when we did this, that all's out the window. In fact, the computer itself is out the window too.
I did. I was like, "Jeff, I don't think she understands because she's trying to script the episode." I was like, "Give her a call."
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad. I really appreciate from both of you. I appreciate that you asked me to come on. And if we can get the word out a little better, it's sort of pathetic. We've been around for 10 years now and nobody knows about us. So I really am glad, because I think we can help people. We can, like you were talking, we can connect them. It's so hard when you're on your own. That's why we started Spay USA 30 years ago, because felt like I was on my own, and I know people all over the country were feeling that way. And once they connect, then it's a whole different story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got to get the word out, and people have to change how they give. And do I need money? Absolutely. But do I have a problem if you want to give to your local shelter and help out? No, I do not. I support it 110%. And I've done galas all over the place, helping other people raise money. I do a better job of raising money for other people than I do for myself. But ignoring that fact, things have to change, because there's a lot of money out there that needs to go. And we make a difference. I have students come through all the time. We've had kids from over 10 different vet schools. We're always doing this. We're always training, and we're always trying to help other groups. And I'll just say, as a veterinarian, I can only do so much. The truth is, it's people like Esther that are the shaker and movers. She's the
No.
she's the puppet master in many ways.
No.
So,
I mean, the word's not out. I'd be the first to admit it. United Spay Alliance has lots of potential, but we have very few. I think our mailing list is 2,000. That's it. And that's, for someone who's been around for 10 years, it's not a lot. So we do the best we can with what we have, but and we have wonderful people. That's our strongest resource, is the people that we have. People like Jeff in the crowd around, and they're inspiring. But I wish we had a more reach, and that's why I was so thankful to you to have me on your podcast, because hopefully that will reach some more people that hadn't known about us, and maybe will reach out and become involved, because they can see that it makes sense to stop the problem before it starts.
Well, Esther, you've done a lot.
there's a lot of great information on the United Spay Alliance website, and you can learn a lot.
Yeah, it's a really robust website. I was pleased too. They really know what they're doing. It's just feeling so good. It's like you with your staff. When you got people that are around you that know what they're doing. It's not all on your shoulders anymore. That's kind of a nice feeling.
Well, I just want you to think about this, Esther, because you have done a lot and you should be proud. But the only problem is you did it the honest way. If you were lying and manipulating data and making sad Sarah McLachlan, your message would be all over the place too.
Well, that I could do without. I'm gonna go back in the woods then and hide because I don't want any part of it. I'm old enough that I should have been retired for 10 years now, and, that whole scene is just not for me. I just been a pleasure talking with the 2 of you. Thank you so much again for having me on,
Well, thank
and,
you for coming, and please come back.
I'd love to. I'd love to. And next time I won't be so
Andy,
scaredy cat.
appreciate it.
You did fine. I'll see y'all later.
All right.
Okay. Bye, Jeff. Bye, Andy.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. We post new episodes every Monday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 12 p.m. Central. So we'll catch you back here next week. We'll see you next time.